So, hello, good afternoon, and very welcome to this podium on a new generation of women in Latin American cinema. Instead of a conceptual introduction, I'm simply going to read a list. It is the lineup of the Munich Film Festival, the Latin American section of the Munich Film Festival in 1999. It was not only the last year of the last century, but also my first year at Munich Film Festival, not as a curator, so I didn't select these films, but I remember quite well because I'm turning out to be like the dinosaur of this festival, the longest working programmer here. So the list is Ação Entre Amigos, Beto Branch, Brasil. Bajo California, Carlos Bolado, México. La Vida es Silvar, Fernando Pérez, Cuba. O Toque do Oboe, Claudio McDowell, Brasil. La Nube, Fernando Solanas, Argentina. El Chevrolet, Leonardo Ricani, Uruguay. 100 años de perdón, Alejandro Sanderman, Venezuela. El coronel no tiene quien le escriba, Arturo Ripstein, México. La vendedora de rosas, Víctor Gaviria, Colombia. Si me comprendieras, Rolando Díaz, Cuba. Silvia Prieto, Martín Rechtmann, Argentina. 11 películas, 11 hombres. No? 11 films, 11 men. That was not to criticize the colleagues who did this program. In fact, one of them was a lady, or is a lady. It was not the male mafia who selected these films. It was simply the films that were around in the year 1999. And to be a bit more autocritical, 8 years ago I did a panel on Brazilian cinema, and I told my colleagues simply put on the panel all the Brazilian filmmakers that are here. And when we did it, I was conscious that we were 6 male men sitting on the podium. I said, this is not going to happen again. So I hope that this podium is going to be different. And let me introduce our panelists today. Camilla Damião, an actor from Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Anita Rocha da Silveira, writer and director from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Cecile van Welie, actor de... ¿Qué ciudad de República Dominicana?
Santo Domingo.
De Santo Domingo, República Dominicana. Y Ulla Prida, guionista, screenwriter and producer, also from Santo Domingo. Perhaps in the list you see another difference. Also, it's not only the presence of male directors in this list, but nearly all of them were from the great famous film capitals of Latin America, Mexico, Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, Havana. And all of them were white, and many of them were already at that time around 60. And if you look to the artistic crew and the cast of these films, the situation is quite the same. I would say Pasalicia Garcia Diego, who is the wife of Arturo Ripstein, was the only female screenwriter. And of course, yeah, there was La Vendedora de Rosas, there was a lady in the center, a non-actor. But besides, the leading roles of these films were gangsters, an old colonel who was waiting for letters, etc. So it's also very male roles that were in the center. And it is simply that what Latin American film industry at the end of the 20th century, before Lucrecia Martel, for example, was like. So my first question to our panelists would be, how is the situation now compared to 23 years ago? I don't know who would like to start. Perhaps Anita.
Yeah, I think I'm the older one, so I'm like more in between generation. It's my second time here in Munich at the festival. What's the difference? I don't know, I think there are 2 factors from this list from 99, from today, at least considering Brazil. That was the access to film schools. especially during Governo Lula. Because, for example, the male guys that I know the name, most of them all come from rich families or directors that used to work with publicity. That still today is a more sexist environment. So that's why they are doing features. They come from a very rich family, or they were the publicity directors. And at that point, 99, was basically private money in Brazil. So as private money, it's much more difficult for a female director. So in Brazil, at least in the beginning of the 2000 years, we started, Governo Lula started a lot of programs for funding, so people could apply to fundings, and also with decentralization, giving money to people to shoot in different areas of Brazil. So with that was possible for more people to start to make films with more diversity. More film schools start to open. And also in the last few years with Me Too movements and other aspects, things changed a little bit more. It's still not perfect, but I think it's in a good path. That when I said the program of Munich, I think it's almost half and half. I don't know. I saw a lot of not talk about Latin America, but talk in general. Of course, that human directors are more difficult to attend the festival because some are mothers, so there's not so much women directors attending. But the films are here. That's what's matters at the end of the day.
But you're completely right if you say generally 50-50. To talk about Latin America, in 2008, when I curated the first program, I verified that it was 19 films, so there was a much larger film production and 5 female directors or co-directors. But in 2019, it was 19 films and perhaps 6 or 7. And this year, it is also 3 or 4 among 10. So it's a smaller program this year, because of pandemic reasons also, but in Latin American cinema, we don't get to a level of 50-50, and it's not like our fault as curators. We can't paint the films we want to show. We need to select the films that there are, and of course we also have to look on quality, and it is a bit like this. So many people tell me, yeah, it's because of Latin American machismo, so the male dominance is stronger. So I'm not sure if this is right, but what is your point of view on that, for example, too?
Sorry, can you?
La cuestión es que en otras películas, en otras secciones hay como un 50% de directores mujeres. En Latinoamérica no llegamos a eso, y no es porque yo no lo quisiera, pero es un poco por falta de tantas películas. Entonces me dice la gente, sí, claro que es, porque América Latina es el continente del machismo. No sé si la explicación es tan fácil ahí.
I think, you're right. I think up to a point it is, as Anita said, it is changing. The industry and culture as a whole is progressing in that sense, but still, in many ways, we're still a bit behind. For example, Europe, in that way. And of course, it is harder maybe for the woman in Latin America to get out of the house and be able to take her role as a producer or director. But I think, as Anita said as well, we're on the right path. For example, in the Dominican Republic, our film industry is very young. It's about a little over 10 years since a lot of production has started going on. And little by little, we've seen an increase of women. Actually, for the film we made, there's 2 women producers, 1 woman director, 2 women writers, and most of the head of each team most of them are women as well. And it is very nice to see there's more opportunity now.
Would you say that it is?
I just was agreeing with her.
Okay. Would you also say that it is related to the fact that it is a young industry? So perhaps the male dominance in the film industry was not so much installed because there was nearly no film industry?
Maybe there's, I couldn't be sure, but there is a lot of. See?
Yeah, because I'm 20, so I started making films around the time I was 10. So I was working on the industry since I was very young, and I have seen a change as it has progressed. Maybe the first 5 to 6 years, I've worked with mainly men, and it was usually male-driven stories. You know, like a guy cheats on his wife, so the guy now like goes out with his friends. You know, instead of the other way around, but like the woman got cheated on, which is fine. I respect every way of storytelling, but it is true that in the Dominican Republic, what drove people were a lot of male protagonist movies about like men just doing things men find funny. And when I was 15, I made a movie called "Marte Um," and that was the first movie that I saw, particularly like in the Dominican Republic, the first big movie that focused on 3 young girls being the protagonists of the film, of a women-driven story, and from a perspective of like, you know, children around that time. And with this film, Carajita, I mean, me and my co-star Magnolia were both women. The story centers around 2 women dealing with issues that maybe if men were to have dealt with those issues, the solution to the problem wouldn't have been the same. Since, for the people that haven't watched Carajita, it's a movie about political differences between social classes, and that depends on whether you are a man or a woman. You know, the way that you approach the issue, you know? Like in this case, if you're a woman, then usually you don't solve the issue. You have your father or your grandfather that solves the issue for you. But if you're a guy, you're the one that does it. So it does like portray this scenario in which the protagonists are women, and yet we live in a country where women don't really have a voice to defend themselves, basically.
I would be interested in knowing the point of view of Camilla. You worked in "MARTE UM," which is a film directed by a male director, but I think the 2 central figures are mother and daughter, so are 2 female figures, and it is in exactly this keyword of a woman-driven plot. And what I would be interested in is, do you see that as something that happens often in Brazilian cinema at the moment? So you as an actor, do you think that you have equal opportunities of having good, interesting protagonist roles as male actors? Or is there still a difference? Are there still more interesting male acting roles than female?
Definitivamente não, assim. Eu acho que, pelo menos nas experiências que eu tive, sempre foram papéis muito estereotipados, assim. Que é diferente do MARTE UM, assim, sabe?
Posso? Definitely no. What I can say is that, in comparison to MARTE UM, the most roles I have access to were stereotypical or stereotypified.
Porque eu acredito muito no avanço que está acontecendo no cenário do cinema, assim, mas eu entendo que para nós, principalmente para mim, como uma mulher negra também, é muito mais lento, assim. É como se a cada 3 passos que o cinema dá, eu dou 1, assim, sabe?
I do believe that there is a progress being made, but if I can speak from my perspective as a woman, especially as a black woman, I still feel that for every 3 steps that are given forward, for me, there's still only 1.
E a maioria dos papéis que eu fiz até hoje, tirando a Eunice, né, a Nina, do MARTE UM, sempre foram papéis estereotipados, assim. Ou da menina negra que se apaixona pelo cara branco, coisas desse tipo. E eu sinto falta de ver não só as mulheres negras, mas as pessoas pretas falando de outras coisas, sem necessariamente precisar de falar de racismo, de violência, sabe? Mas falar de afeto, de amor, de sonhos, de medos, de falar de humanidade, assim, sabe?
Mm-hmm. And most of the roles that I've been that I've acted in, with the exception of Nina now in MARTE UM, were these stereotypical roles, for instance, of the black girlfriend of the white protagonist. And one of the other things that I still miss are roles in which there's a lot of space for subjectivity and a lot of space for humanity and dreaming that are not only focusing on racism, but they're all just like more broad human matters.
E eu acho que é exatamente esse, assim, a figura da Nina e da mãe dela é exatamente isso, assim, são duas mulheres que acabam conduzindo toda a história, né? A história perpassa muito, depende muito dessas duas personagens, e eu acredito que até hoje foi o personagem mais humano que eu fiz, assim, nesse sentido, sabe? Tanto em processo criativo quanto de me ver num outro lugar, assim, num lugar mais humano.
And you can see a difference in MARTE this film that I'm in, that's here in the festival, that it is a good example of this female-driven plot in which a lot of what the story depends exactly on my character and the character of my mom. And for me, this was, until now, the most human role I've ever been able to take, not only because of the, in terms of the creative process and how much freedom I had, but also in terms of how human and how how much depth this character had.
E eu só acho que isso foi permitido porque essa história é contada pelo Gabito, que é um homem negro. Embora é a perspectiva dele como um homem negro sobre essas mulheres. E eu acredito que se essa história fosse contada por uma mulher negra, ela talvez passaria por outros lugares assim também.
And I'm saying all this even though this film was directed by Gabito, by Gabriel Martins, who is a man but a black man. And even so, I still believe that if this story were being told by a black woman director, it would be likely that it would still focus on like the story would go through maybe other ways. It would find other resolutions to certain points.
Yeah, there's an interesting point about this, because it's like the second time that this argument appears. We're not only talking about gender quota, we're talking about art aesthetics and storytelling that changes through the male or female gaze. You said this story would have been told in a different way if it was directed by a female filmmaker, and you said CARAJITA probably would also have been a different film if there wasn't two producers, a screenwriter and one of the two directors as a feminine perspective in it. So what do you think makes the difference? Because it is easy to say, but concretely, what do you think would make the difference of storytelling if this film was told by a man or if this film was told by a woman?
I think it's the human experience of each of us. Like, it's not only individual to the person, but it's also very conditioned with how you've grown up based on, in this case, gender, and like the things you have had to overcome and deal with just because of that punctual thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought about. Oh my
Sorry.
I'll pick it up now. I've been thinking about this for a while, and for a while I studied this philosopher Carl Jung, and he went with George Lucas, director of Star Wars, to like a hill, like for like weeks, because they were discussing about the drama and like the narrative of Star Wars, and they got to the conclusion that there are different archetypes based on female and men, and like how these archetypes define the way that a woman sees the world and how a man sees the world. So these archetypes, I mean, of course, men have female attributes as well as women having male attributes, but depending on where you were raised, we were raised in the Dominican Republic, which is a very sexist country in the sense that women are more oppressed. Those archetypes are more highlighted in the sense of women are more sensitive. Male can't cry. Like, that's not something that people, like, you know, talked about. You never were like talking to your friends like, oh, my dad was crying yesterday. No, you were said like, oh, my mom was crying, but she always cries, you know? It was usually something like that, and it was like interesting because I learned it in school while the time I was like filming the movie, and my teacher was talking to me about Carl Jung and the different archetypes, and he was like, you know, you're gonna go film a movie now, and keep that in mind, you know, women see the world differently because they live in a different world than men do.
But at the end, it were two male guys talking about
and it's
gender
very
roles.
curious, right? Because he was like, he wanted to talk about Leia and like what made Leia like so important, like in Star Wars. And if you think about it, Leia has very strong male characteristics. You know, she's very driven and less emotional than, for example, Luke, which is more emotional. Sorry, we're talking about Star Wars. It's just the archetypes of men and women in film. And he was describing his characters, and that he decided that his characters don't have to be women to represent women issues, which I thought it was an interesting take.
And Camilla, who you brought up the subject on if MARTE UM was directed by a woman, what do you think would be the main difference in, well, perhaps simply plot-wise?
O MARTE em específico, eu acho que mudaria poucas coisas, porque eu acredito que o Gabito, como homem negro, ele consegue entender muito a subjetividade da mulher negra, assim, sabe? Mas
I believe that in the specific case of MARTE there would have been probably very few differences, because I do believe that Gabriel Martins, as like the director, as a black man, he was capable of having the sensitivity to understand a lot of the condition of what is to be a black woman in Brazil.
Mas em termos de subjetividade, eu sinceramente não sei responder isso, porque eu penso que o mundo, a ideia de mundo que a gente tem hoje, ela é masculina. Embora o homem tenha um lado feminino também, assim como as mulheres têm um lado masculino. Mas a gente aprende por uma construção social a negar, eu aprendo a negar o meu masculino e o homem aprende a negar o feminino dele. Então, eu acredito que, não sei como responder isso, porque a ideia do feminino livre ainda é uma coisa muito nova para a gente. Assim, a gente ainda está num processo de lutar para a nossa subjetividade vir à tona, sabe?
But in terms of subjectivity, I find this question very hard to answer, because it's very hard to speak how like of a female worldview in general, since we're actually, as a society, so much far from it. Like, we're still, all of us, kind of bounded by this male gaze, this male vision of the world, in a way that makes me hard to imagine how it would be punctually if this was under the case, which is why we have to still fight to get to that point where we can free our worldview and to be able to access what it means to have like this female this female gaze, this female view of the world.
Até porque, por exemplo, teve algumas cenas que eu me lembro que foram não para mim, assim, mas para a atriz que fez a minha companheira no filme. Que para ela era muito difícil, assim, porque ela tinha questões com o corpo dela, de inseguranças, assim. E foi uma cena que foi escrita por um homem, assim, né? E o Gabito foi muito generoso de sentar com a gente e conversar, tipo, como que vocês querem fazer essa cena, sabe? Tipo, o que a gente faz para fazer uma cena de sexo entre duas mulheres negras e que não seja uma cena de sexo estereotipada para um público masculino, sabe? Como que uma mulher lésbica vai ver essa cena aqui, ela vai se ver nela, sem ser um negócio tipo erótico para o público masculino. Então, ele deu essa abertura para a gente criar. Tipo, tinha coisa que eu falava, não, Gabi, isso aqui não dá para colocar, sabe? Vamos fazer assim, vamos para outro caminho. Então, ele foi muito aberto nesse sentido.
For instance, there is an intimate scene in this film between me and my scene counterpart, who's also a black woman, and it's this sex scene that was written by a male director, but who was very who was generous enough to sit down with us and say, okay, how is it that we do we want to do this? How do we feel more comfortable with it? And of course, not for me, but for my partner in the scene, she had a few issues with her body, for instance, and that made it necessary for us to discuss how would make it feel like one side comfortable for her, but also on the other side, trying to make this scene in a way that was not being made erotic for the gaze of the male public. So this is a discussion that we had. We sat down to try to find a way into how to convey this in a, not in this form, but to find new ways.
Eu acho que assim, resumindo, a gente vem de uma escola do teatro negro, assim, sabe? Abdias Nascimento, de uma escola que ela é muito integral, e eu acho que isso facilita esses diálogos entre o gênero. Mas não que não exista questões ainda. Assim. Por exemplo, eu nunca tive oportunidade. Trabalhei agora há pouco tempo com uma diretora mulher, mas era uma diretora branca. Eu não conheço.
Mas de teatro?
Não, uma diretora de cinema. Assim, rodei com ela um filme, mas é uma mulher branca. E ainda assim é aquela subjetividade feminina, mas não é a subjetividade de uma mulher negra. Ainda não tive a oportunidade de trabalhar com uma mulher negra, assim, nesse sentido.
In terms of MARTE UM, why the experience was at times so easy or not that wasn't that much of an effort is because we come from the same movement of theater, of Abdias Nascimento, and this kind of, we spoke the same language of this black theater that made it possible to create these scenes even regardless of the gender differences. But on the other hand, I've recently worked in another film with a female director who was white, and there I still found that it was harder finding these subjectivities and finding having the same openness and the same room for subjectivity that I found, for instance, working at MARTE UM.
There is something I'm curious about. I also work both in cinema and theater, and I know that you come from theater. And I think that in cinema, acting was one of the only domains, artistic domains at least, where women have always been accepted. Perhaps there were also the film editors who classically could be women. But there's also the fact that as an actor, you don't have any control on what is happening with your image in the editing room when you're in cinema. In theater, the situation is, perhaps I will do this in Portuguese again after. Yeah? In theater, the situation is quite different because you can't stage a play with the actor on stage. So the actor keeps the control of the performance and can encounter the director at each moment until the day of the first performance. And that is a control that you don't have as a cinema actor. And my question would be, if you doing both of these things as a woman working as an actor, you feel a difference in power structure between theater and cinema. Para explicar, você fez teatro e cinema, né? No cinema, a presença das mulheres como atrizes sempre teve, mas tem o fato que você tem controle sobre a sua imagem só até o ponto de terminar a filmagem. O que se faz no processo de edição é totalmente controle do diretor. No teatro, o assunto é muito diferente, porque uma obra de teatro não se pode fazer sem os atores. Mas você exerce o poder sobre o seu papel até o dia da estreia, e você pode fazer resistência ao diretor, à diretora, até o último momento. E para mim seria interessante entender se para você que faz as duas coisas, tem como mulher uma diferença no controle sobre a sua personagem entre o teatro e o cinema, que se você tem a impressão de ter mais controle sobre a sua imagem quando está trabalhando em teatro que quando está trabalhando em cinema.
Ah, total, total, assim, as experiências que eu tive com teatro, elas foram muito mais libertadoras, assim, muito mais, assim, a minha autonomia de poder participar do processo, de escolher o que eu acho que deve ou não ser dito. Mas eu acho que no cinema isso depende muito de quem está contando a história, assim, eu acho que é sempre muito importante a gente pensar de que lugar que uma história está sendo contada.
For sure, like I definitely agree with that. All the experience I've had in theater were much more liberating than the ones I had in cinema, in terms of the autonomy I had, in terms of deciding what I would be able to say or not say. And then and not that it's not possible in cinema, but it's much more dependent on this role of the director, of like from which place is this story being told, from whose view, basically. And
Porque eu tenho a sensação de que o teatro, o ator, a atriz, o diretor, ele é um processo de criação coletivo, mas coletivo mesmo, assim. E que o cinema ele acaba sendo um pouco solitário, sabe? E ele começa a agregar vários outros tipos de linguagem, assim, no cinema. Tipo, às vezes, uma atriz de teatro, a sensação que eu tenho, se ela não tiver uma boa experiência também com o audiovisual, se ela não tiver uma noção de fotografia, enfim, dessas coisas mais técnicas do audiovisual, ela não vai conseguir fazer cinema. Eu conversei isso muito inclusive, no último trabalho que eu estava...
I do believe that from my experience in theater, they were much more collective. The decision-making process was much more collective than in cinema. Well, I also believe that in cinema, if the actor, actress, if they don't have a certain understanding of the audiovisual form, of all the techniques that are inside, that belong to it, I feel like they're not going to be able to do a good job if they don't, if they're not familiar with the whole of the process.
Enfim, no último trabalho que eu fiz, eu conversei um pouco com uma atriz que ela é muito mais do teatro do que do cinema, e ela falou para mim: Camila, eu odeio fazer cinema, assim, eu faço porque agora no momento é uma coisa que está me pagando melhor, mas eu acho o cinema um pouco vazio, assim. Mas é isso, eu acho que depende muito de como a gente olhar, porque eu acho que o cinema e o teatro são dois núcleos que estão caminhando paralelamente, mas em tempos diferentes, assim. Eu sinto que o cinema ele absorve mais a contemporaneidade do mundo que a gente está vivendo, e que o teatro ele ainda é mais talvez mais apegado com a tradição do teatro lá de trás, assim. E não que isso seja ruim ou bom. Acho que eu estou tentando falar isso para pontuar a ideia de que são dois núcleos com tempos diferentes, assim.
And in this most recent project that I shot, there was one of my friends, my colleagues, an actress who was saying, Camilla, I actually, I hate doing cinema. If I could, I would be only doing theater. But like at the moment, cinema is what is available, and it's what paying me better. So there are a lot of people who share a bit of this view, and I do believe that cinema and theater they are walking these like two courts who are walking these different paths, and who have a different relationship to time, in a way that cinema, with all its issues, it's so much more. It proves to be more, in my view, more able to absorb a little bit of this contemporaneity of the times we're living in, while theater sometimes still resists to clinging to this past time.
I would also like to know from your part, Anita, you write your films and you direct your films, and yeah, we had both of your long feature films here in Munich, Kill Me Please, and Medusa, and of course there's the objective fact that there are quite a lot women protagonists in the film. You know, that's for sure. And also, I think production-wise, cast-wise, there is this female presence. But do you think that in terms of storytelling, or in which terms your film, in terms of storytelling, is different from like a male director from your same generation and your same place of origin?
I think yes, but mostly because my films are about, I put a lot of my experience as a woman and things that are, and from my imaginary. I think, so, especially me, I was a teenager 20 years ago. I think I'm a little bit older than both, at least both of them, you don't know. But as a teenager, I grew up, 95% of the films I watched were directed by guys, and with guys as a leading actor. The woman is more like the second part. So I think men and women, we grow up with the male point of view being the what's normal, what's the... And even as a woman, a film that was a woman leading character, for us was an exception. So... I heard this somewhere, like when you see a film that the main character is a guy, it's like you are going to New York. You have never been to New York, but have seen that in all the movies, so you know what New York is about. But sometimes a film with a leading woman, directed by a woman, is like entering a forest. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think now I think things are changing. Now maybe it's a generation that will grow up watching more films directed by women and with women leading characters. So that will be a little bit more normal. But at least some years ago, it was even if a film, more than half of the world population a woman, but it was still the exception, the woman point of view. So I think, but I think things are changing. I think that for the next generation, both point of views will be the normal ones. I don't like the word normal, but English is not my main language, so it's the word I have now.
Before, Anita, you said something very interesting, and this would be a question both to you as to Ulla, who is also a producer. You said things started to change also because there's a public funding system, because through private financing as a woman, it's much more difficult to finance a film. And I would be interested how that comes. Is capitalism more machist?
Yeah, I don't know. In Brazil, at least, before the founding era, it was what people call their balcão, like a balcony. The guys would go to the companies and ask for the money to a CEO. Mm-hmm. So it's normally the CEO is also a guy. They go, they have their whiskey, they talk shit, and then he get the money. But basically like that. In Brazil, it was like that. People would go to a CEO of a company and ask for the money. And it was a white guy from a rich family asking for a white guy from a rich family. It was not only... Also, there's no black guys doing film as well. Only white guys and not even from poor families. At least middle class. And with the fundings, things start to change a bit. Now we had Bolsonaro, the funds had stopped, but these elections are about to come. But with public funding and even with supports of funds from Europe, like Robert Bau's Fund and World Cinema Fund, things start to. The opportunities are a little bit more equal.
Or more democratic.
Yeah, more democratic, a little bit more. Even, of course, that the fundings, are still more guys are getting money, but at least they have to give some for women, because if not, it's gonna look ugly.
No, it's bad, yeah. They will look bad, at least. For us, yeah, I think also Dominican Republic, we have from, I think, 2011, around there, we have like a film law that is to to move the film industry in the Dominican Republic, and Dominican companies can, instead of paying like their full taxes, they can use 25% of their annual taxes, and instead of giving to the government, give to filmmakers to do films. And that has certainly helped a lot, because it's, as she said, giving opportunity to more people to access these funds, but it's still, you have to go to a company and ask for the money. And for me, in this case, this is my first film. And it was even if I do come from a middle class, and I have access to these people as a white woman, and my parents know, like, are business people, so they know business people. And in that case, you would have thought, oh, maybe, you know, it's easy for her. It's not, it still wasn't. I went to some meetings where the CEO of the company, even if he's not, you know, going to have to give it from his pocket and lose the money, he's still like paying taxes, which he has to do anyway. I was once asked, as soon as I went in the door, like, so what do you want? Money. And I was like, oh, yes, please.
Well.
Like, you know, but it was like very aggressive, and obviously that person did not give us money for the film. And I had to knock on many, many doors, even with the tax incentive. And still, it took me, it was a very like hard thing to do to raise the money for this film. So yes, it does make it easier, but there's still, maybe in Brazil, things have advanced a bit more. It's a bigger country, I don't know. But Dominican Republic is, we're gonna get there, I'm sure. Still a long way to go.
Yeah, of course.
I forgot to say one thing. Like this film that I'm here, Medusa, it was founded basically, it's just before Bolsonaro was elected, by a fund that was a prize from my previous film. That used to be because in Brazil, because I went to a lot of film festivals, so with all the prize in film festival, there was this funding that you apply and to get the money because your previous film went really well. And that was it, because all the other fundings, I was rejected in the scripts. Even if I have a successful first feature, my second one didn't get any international funding. It's only a Brazilian production. We didn't co-produce because I didn't want any. We try a lot. We didn't want any co-production funds. And even in Brazil, the funds that I had to apply with the script and my intention note were rejected. This one was my last hope, and I got it. And then luckily, we had an early Cannes selection. And so we were able to go to some private company and say, hey, we're going to Cannes. You want to put some money here and go to Cannes as well? and that was how we were able to post-produce the film. So yeah, so I think a lot of people reading the script thought it was super weird. It was not going to work. And my project was not financed because of the project in the end of the day. So these things still happen, and I'm very lucky.
And now the project is here.
That Brazil used to have this fund that I hope will come. I hope fund in Brazil will come back, but we never know.
There's also a curious fact, you know. When I was talking about this panel with my colleagues who does like the business-to-business convention outside the beer garden convention, she told me that in fact in Germany, of course in our system, the public television is much involved. So there are commissioning editors from the public television who fund the films. And of course, among these editors, there is a great part of women, perhaps it starts to be even the majority at the moment. But she tells me the problem is that although the editors who fund the films are women, they still prefer to give the money to the male directors because they don't believe the women to be able to do the projects. So what I was wondering is if you know a similar phenomenon. I didn't know about this, to be honest. A similar phenomenon in your countries, and at the end, what is the right way to break patriarchy if patriarchy is defended by women who are in the leading positions?
Yeah, I was gonna say like that. It's a very interesting thing to say because it is true. When I was in school, the mothers of like my friends usually were like, oh, because like, you know, I always defend men because they work so hard and like they bring so much money home and they work and they make money. But like, no, I defend men because men work really hard to sustain the family and stuff. And I've always wondered because I'm like, for example, like in school, if I were to say something, my classmates were like, oh, like here goes Cecile to say something again. But if one of my male classmates said something, oh, that is so interesting. That is so very interesting that you said that. And I'm like, do you find it interesting because that guy is just really stupid? Or do you find it interesting because I'm a woman? Which is just very curious for me to say. Because like men there, since they have so many opportunities just because they're men, they usually tend to just settle with that. they're like, oh, I'm gonna run my father's company, so I don't really care about going to a really good college or like going to like or like working really hard at school because I'm gonna like inherit all of this money. Well, my sister has to work really hard because like she's not gonna be the head of the company. So, you know, it's like kind of like this dilemma, like this like thing in my country where like men are defended for working harder and yet they kind of don't, you know? They don't. I mean, not all my dad works, but you know.
No, I think it's sometimes we can be our own like enemy, like our own worst enemy, and it is because of like the cultural biases as we were raised, that as like there's this figure of the men and there's this figure of the woman, and they're supposed to do this and we're supposed to do this other thing. And it is, yeah, a lot of women are part of like the problem as well, because that's how they were made and like formed. So I think it just like little by little, like Anita said, I think the newer generations are already like more sensible to all these things, and it's not gonna be the same like people growing up today, like when I was in school or college, and like the way we face things is gonna keep opening up. Not only like now we don't even have anymore just female and male, we have like a more variety of gender and gender roles and things like that. So I think every year that passes, there's gonna be like more como sensitivity. I don't know, that's what. Yeah, towards like other points of views and perspectives.
I have just an observation because of the Urban's editors. When I was in college, like a lot of years ago, the teachers used to say, oh, Urban's are amazing editors because it's like sewing. They'd say that a lot. Yeah, they'd say you can. I heard that a lot. Like you should, for the women in that class.
Cutting hair, cutting
No,
films.
it was sewing. It was sewing. I heard that a lot. Women's a great editor because editing is like sewing. I heard that in different courses I take, that you should go to editing because for women editing they are so good because of sewing. That was said as something very normal for many years. And I think this is a legend that since the 20s that women are good editors because of sewing. But in the 20s, like 100 years ago, that was nice because women were able to get jobs in the industry, like also as like script girls because it has to be organized, and women are more organized. And then women start to produce because women are organized, and men are more creative. And I don't know, but a phenomenon in Brazil, the VOD used to be more male dominant, but now it's changing a bit. I hope I can get some work on VOD because I need to get some money. Like, so far, I support myself as a script writer, and I want to support myself as a director back home. Like, I want to do my features, but we take forever doing features in Brazil. So now I really want to support myself directing things for publicity or for television or for the VOD companies. And so far, I can't. That's something that bothers me. But I hope that now I have 2 features. Come on, someone hired me there. I wanted to be to earn my money only as a director, not as a script writer anymore. I'm done with script writing, so only for my project. So that's it.
Yeah, of course.
It's like she said, like women are so good at acting because of sewing. It reminded me like when I was like
No, editing.
like editing because of it. Yeah, like when I was younger and like when I started acting very young, and I always told people like, oh, I want to be an actress. And they said, well, of course, you're very dramatic. But like if a male were to say, oh, I'm an actor, they're like, oh, that is so interesting. That is very good. that is so interesting, very good. And if you see like, you know, globally, you know, like you have actresses like Natalie Portman, which are like very recognized. But like if you talk to somebody, when you ask them like, oh, who's your favorite actor? They will tend to say a male because it's more shocking to them seeing a men portray emotions than women. Women portraying emotions is more common. You know, a woman crying is more common. But Leonardo DiCaprio cries in a movie. They're like, oh, he's a very good actor. And he is. But women are too. They think that just because we're women, we're easier to cry on screen or be more dramatic on screen because of the fact that we're women.
Wow, yeah. It made me discover in some fact, something quite depressing with the sewing. I didn't know that. You know,
I heard that a lot of times.
yeah, and it is completely coherent because you know why? Because at the end, in the 1920s, an editor wasn't considered to be an artistic work, but it's the lady who wears the white gloves and has to cut
And
the
not
film
destroy the material?
and not destroy. Have like
Small hands?
small hands, like a seamstress, in order to cut the film and to put it again. And it is something that is not considered to be an artistic work. And in the moment, it is. Starting today, if you're editing and there's no raw material, your editor on the Avid is like, or the Final Cut or whatever you've cut with is like your dramaturg. You know, it's like it's an artistic counselor. And in this moment, that it stops to be a purely manual thing, the female predominance in this field disappeared. So this is quite an uncomfortable point. So perhaps to get, because we have to get to an ending, also to a kind of more of perspectives. I would be interested in which solution concretely are faced by female filmmakers, and I say filmmaker really in the sense of everybody. You all are filmmakers. I think we had to get away from the conception of filmmaker being only a director. So what are you concretely doing compared to like in other countries? For here in Germany, it is an issue since quite a long time, and there is this movement pro quota, which tries to impose a gender quota on the film productions, on the presence of women in the artistic cast, for example. So it is still not successful, but it has been going on for a time, you know. Yeah, it is slow. So, but I would be interested in knowing what initiatives or like empowerment movements you could find in Latin America.
Like, I can only speak from like my personal experience. I'm already working on producing my second film, and it's just not taking no for an answer in a way. Like, there's so many people that are gonna be against you doing this, and if you just let that get into your head. I can't count the many times I was told like, oh, you're gonna do this film, but you're gonna be away from your husband, and you're gonna, it's like, yes, well, he works too, and he gets away from me, so I work too, and it's, you just have to keep going and keep trying and trying and trying. With the quota thing, I'm like not all sold on the quotas, because when you say, like, they do help get more women seen and prove themselves, and then, you do a good job, and then they hire you again. But on the other hand, oh, you're here because of the quota. You're the only reason you're here is because of the quota. And then, so I'm not sometimes so sure how that, like, if it's like a friend or a foe kind of thing. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm an actress, so I use acting as a way of portraying a message. When I was younger, I did films that were offered to me. When I got older and I started to like really read the scripts and like think about it, I wanted to take on roles that could send a message to the people in the Dominican Republic. Because, I alone can't change a country. It's impossible. But in a way, I feel like through art, through cinema, I can portray a message that telling people, you know what, you're not the only person feeling this way. You're not the only person going through this. And me even being like, I'm white, I'm not poor. And that in the Dominican Republic is like a huge thing, Either you're poor or you're not. So the fact that I can use like my privileges to help others. The film CARAJITA, talks about a lot of these political injustices. So, I don't want to put myself in a position like, oh, I'm black because I'm not. But I'm white and I know that's wrong. So at least for the people in my social area, I can say, you know what, we're white, but that does not mean that we're better. And through cinema, they see, oh, well, that's the daughter of this person. She's saying this, so maybe, she might be right. Like, it's a slow process because, But it's a way of helping. I feel like, you know, not only do I get to do what I love, I also get to put out a message out there that, you know, that I believe in, basically. Unless it's Star Wars, I would be in Star Wars.
I think I used to be more a big militant. Like, for example, the quota of something that I was super forward in Brazil, but mostly because they're in the public funding. The people that analyze the project is anonymous, you don't know. So it can be like 5 white guys, heterosexual, you don't know if they're women, if they're someone black, or if someone queer, you don't know who are analyzing. So I was pro have a gender and also a quota black and Native American. But now with Bolsonaro, I don't know, I think we have bigger issues in Brazil. I don't know, much more, I don't know, I can't think about, for me, the cinemas think, okay, let's get back discussing, but now, I don't know, with Bolsonaro there, I have so much bigger problems. We don't have funding. So the quota of things this discussion is postponed. But the elections are coming, so yeah, I hope so. But now we have bigger issues there. But I hope to get back to a more secure place that we can start to discuss other things about equality.
Camilla, você quisera ainda uma coisa?
Eu não sei, assim, eu acho que eu me sinto muito atrasada ainda, assim. Quando eu falo isso, eu falo representando um povo, assim. Eu acho que as políticas de cota que a gente tem, não só no Brasil, mas no mundo ainda, para as pessoas pretas ainda é muito defasado. A gente tem uma dívida histórica enorme. Eu acho que no mundo atual não há cotas que conseguem, enfim, aproximar ou igualitar a gente assim perto das outras pessoas. Embora eu acho que elas são necessárias.
I feel that I cannot speak without also speaking for a whole people and for a whole history. And while I do feel that like quotas are necessary and positive, I still think that they're still so deficitary that they don't even they're only like doing a small part into trying to close this huge gap of inequality and of historical accountability that exists between like blacks and whites.
Well, I think I have to excuse, I didn't give any opportunity to the audience to ask questions because there were so many intense discussions. I would at least give the opportunity for one urgent question. Yes, please.
Meu português é não muito bom, então eu vou continuar em inglês, okay? Thank you for having this talk here. I've been to see MARTE yesterday, and I also saw Paloma, which is in a way related because it's about homophobia and the life in Brazil in general. I couldn't see your films yet, so I tried to.
They're still
see as
on.
much as I can. Yes, I know.
Yeah, let's watch the film directed by Oman too.
Okay. So thank you for the pro quota question. I only want to say, I think from my perspective, I work as a prop standby since 1999. And the thing is to network, and the thing is to support each other, and the thing is to get a way to copy I don't like to say male and female way, but I found it, for every project I have to discuss money, and it's unfortunately become very stylish that female line producers or producers copy the male way to negotiate the pay. For example, I think a friend of mine told me once, it's like men going into an arena and one has to be the winner instead, and the women are more trying to find. We are like, not we, a lot of men tend to be like this, but it's a kind of very, very old-fashioned way of thinking that one has to be the winner. But we are all, like you said before, we're all filmmakers, we're all on one side. And I only can encourage you to go to network and help each other. If you have a female colleague next to you, or you know someone, just, you know, do whatever you can. Maybe it's just a call, maybe it's just a little clap on the back saying you're doing right, and smile at each other and try to evolve and get this thing on. And I hope one day we're not going to sit here and talk about male and female. And but it's you know, it's let's not work against each other. But sometimes we have to fight, and I'm a fighter too, and I'm very radical in things. And I've just made my decision how to go on dealing with my work. So, and I'm quite successful. And if I say no and the project will not appear, another one will come. So, thank you. Muito obrigado.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, but I don't agree. I thought it was very patronizing what you said. We are not all filmmakers. And yes, we have to recall what Camilla said. There's a big equality. We have to discuss colonialism. We have to discuss, sorry, but for me listening, that and you telling us what to do, no, please, no. Sorry, but it was very patronizing. I'm very sad that I hear that. You have to think about the colonialism inside what you said. Sorry, that's just not okay.
I'm sorry, so you did not get me right.
I get you very wrong, sorry.
I think so. I'm sorry again. I didn't wanna lead it in this way. It's interesting that you hear it this way, but I didn't mean it at all. Of course, we have to talk about the issues you just said. Of course, I just was trying to say from a filmmaker's view, like it's just from my reality that since I discuss every project for my wage, of course, and for assistance and whatever, this was my example. I'm trying to explain it more to wash out this misunderstanding, okay? So what I see is that the other side I'm talking about money with is always mostly building up this wall saying, well, I'm the one that gives you money and you're the one that gets the money, you know? And I was trying to say that this is for me something we need to communicate. Also the person, or I'm doing it always, the person I negotiate with is like, hey, we work on the same project and you want to have a certain quality. This is why you called me, and I would love to do this, but we have to talk about this on an equal base. This is what I was trying to say. And I don't think I'm patronizing.
Yeah, but I think us as Latinas, we have other issues.
Yes.
And Camilla, as a black woman, she has other issues.
I know.
So, and for you saying how you should talk, and that for me didn't sound...
I wasn't trying to tell you what to do. I was trying to give an example how... Can you see it from that one now? Is that...
Not
okay.
Let's move forward.
Tá bom.
We have to be finishing now, but please add your comment.
I wanted to just say I encourage you to be on the side of women, be on the side of people who have been racialized. Do it. Don't be shy. Just really try to support each other. I think it's important to say it. And I think I just wanted to give one little film tip, because I think it's interesting for female filmmakers. There's a woman named Nina Menkes, M-E-N-K-E-S. She's an American filmmaker, and she's made a film which has been going to a lot of festivals, and it's called Brainwashed. And it's all about dissecting the male view of women in film, from the beginning of film to now. And I think, I haven't seen it yet, but I've been told when you've seen that film, you really get a grip on, you know, what area with the work to be done, that it's super interesting. So I just wanted to give that little tip and just say, don't be shy, go for it. Because you heard, she said she's not so much for the quota, yeah? Look at what happened in Sweden. They made a quota, and they gave half the money to women, and they got lots of prizes, they were successful, and, you know, you just should demand it, in my opinion, as a woman and as a racialized
But
person.
someone has a question, because it was opportunity for a question.
Yeah.
Someone has a question for us. It was opportunity to ask something, not to...
Yeah, we do have to finish, so I give you the opportunity to ask a question and a very brief reply, but then we have to be leaving, sorry.
Maybe since some of us white people from Europe, sorry that you have to explain these things to us again and again, but maybe you, if you don't want to, you don't have to, but maybe you can make it clear again why it's stupid to give tips as a European German lady to...
Sorry, but
Because
is
I
it a
think
question?
this was my question. I don't know if you want to answer this, because I think it's
no,
not
but we
nice.
need a question, not an answer.
That was my question.
sorry.
Understood.
If you want to.
I think colonialism is now a big discussion, not only in Brazil, but in Americas. And for me, it's kind of weird that in the end of this, in a chance for one last question, she took this opportunity to say how we should portray ourselves, and that we are all filmmakers. In the moment that to ask, she decided to talk about her experience and say how, for us, like, and we have our lives, we have our experience. I made 2 films. I'm doing something right, and for me that was an issue. Using the time for a question to say how, to give suggestions of how we should portray ourselves and how we should act, and that for me sound a little bit as a what you call in Brazil colonialist.
But Florian said the same before. He said, I consider everybody as a filmmaker.
Maybe in the contest I missed that.
I took it from a different point of view.
It was like more saying how you giving suggestions or how to behave.
I was just trying to encourage all of the ladies to help each other, but you got it wrong.
Okay, I think the mistake was mine, because I gave too little space to a real discussion because of my my un-German mismanagement of time. That is, I excuse for that, but I would suggest that we continue talking down. We have this beautiful festival center and a beer garden to discuss these things, because we have to free now the venue for the next event. I'm sorry. Okay.
I constantly am listening that I speak too loud, that I should speak low, that I'm constantly listening. I can't understand you. Your English is too bad. Shut up. I'm here in the festival. I have listened to some things that I'm only being hurt a bit. I totally relate. We can continue this conversation. Yes.
I'm almost giving up my career of filmmaking because it's so frustrating here as a Latina in Europe. And I totally understand them. Like, in the end, people come and say, but you know what? You need to do like this. Come on, people, please. It's like,
I said let's. I said not do this. I said let's.
You are not understanding our point.
Okay, it is amazing. I didn't think to extend the discussion to Latin filmmaking in Germany, because I didn't think there was somebody present. But I think, in fact, we need to do another panel like this and to continue. We need
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here, and please let's continue talking outside.